Hey guys, welcome back to the big show. Today we've got a special treat for you. We've got a coach who has, well, let me ask you this. 9 years ago, uh, 17 meds per day for any sort of issue you could really think of. Um, some mental, emotional, discomfort there, some disability, some obesity. 17 meds a day. And what if you could overcome that? What if you could bend the ear of somebody who's been able to not only overcome that themselves, but then found kind of the tumblers in the lock to help other people unlock some of that. We've got Coach Jessyca Reynolds, and her mantra is she lives to help other people live at a higher level of freedom. And so we are so excited. We've talked with her a little bit, and we are going to unleash her on you. And we are so excited. So Jessyca, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And just tell us a little bit of your origin story. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I'm 50 years old.
Hey, we'll start a club.
I live in Southern Virginia. And I struggled with eating disorders since I was 11 years old. There's some documentation that I struggled with food issues before that, like a child psychologist when I was 4 told my mom I was obsessed with food at 4. But at 11 is when I started engaging in bulimia. And then I continued that behavior and experienced bouts of anorexia, binge eating, mostly bulimia, compulsive eating, emotional eating until I was 41 years old. I was 41. And then miraculously, and with the power of nutrition and healing, the last almost 9 years, I'm a transformation. And that's kind of my story.
Wow. So for me, I had a point where I had yo-yo dieted for years and years and years. And then I got into the chronic exercise, and then that didn't work. And I just got to a point of being obese, and I said, I'm just sick and tired of being literally sick and very tired. Did you have a let's try this attitude, or was it a rock bottom catharsis, or somewhere in the middle? What was the tipping point?
It's funny because, when you're sick for that many years, decades, it becomes almost ingrained. And I know for me, I thought my identity was sickness. I literally thought, like, this is just who I am. I didn't think I had a problem. I thought I was a problem. And when you believe that way, there's no way out because it's you. And so I struggled with suicide attempts. I struggled with, my mental health issues were so severe that I had even had electric shock therapy because I tried all the meds and everything. And I was in a place when this transformation happened, I had already tried everything. I had done low carb back in the 90s when it was popular, when it was Dr. Atkins, and I still binged and purged. Yes, it helped me lose weight. I was great at losing weight. I was even better at gaining it back. I had done even prior to this change, I had literally done everything: pill, shake, shot. I did a 60-day juice fast. So I want to point this out because there's no lack of willpower in a person who is struggling. It's not that. You have to have willpower to do a 60-day juice fast. I lost 60 pounds in that 60 days, but gained back 70 within 3 months. So you find yourself back in that same state that's worse. Actually, not the same state. You typically, when you've done that your whole life, and I'm sure you know this, you find yourself in a worse state than you were than when you tried the new thing. I did have a defining moment. For about 5 years, I just gave up. I was worn out and exhausted from dieting, from therapists. I had over 30 therapists. I've been in 6 different eating disorder hospitals. I had tried every diet, as I said. I was a vegetarian for 14 years. I did all the things. I had even done low carb. And I believed that I was so worn out from trying all the things. I would finally have peace if I just said, you know what? I don't care anymore. I am not going to fight this thing. So what? I have an eating disorder. I am bulimic. It's what I do every day. I binge eat. It's like I just accepted that because I believed it was my identity. And so when you give up the fight, and somebody probably needs to hear this today, that sounds peaceful. Like, I'm not going to fight anymore, right? I'm just going to let myself be fat, right? I mean, I literally, that's what I thought. I'm like, it's just who I don't even care if people know I'm bulimic. I'm not even, like, it just is. When you stop fighting that, when there's no opposition to that thing, it takes over at a rate that you would not believe. And my health in those 5 years where I just kind of gave up, it spiraled. That's when I wound up having electric shock therapy, on more meds than ever, was heavier than ever. I got to 309 pounds. At one point when I was struggling with anorexia, I was down to 115. I'm almost 5'10". So these are extremes,
Sure,
especially for a tall girl. But I really was at that point where, like, I don't care if I die. I didn't. You couldn't. I thought my life is over. My best days are over. I was 41 years old. My whole identity was caught up in sickness. And I was experiencing these, like, in the middle of the night. I was so heavy that I would wake up gasping for air because the weight of my own chest was making it hard for me to breathe. And that was scary. And it was scary for me, but it was even more scary for my husband. And he basically said, I wouldn't go to the doctor then. Like, I would not. Other than going to the psychiatrist to get medication refilled, I would not go and get checked out because they're going to be like, you're fat, you need to lose weight. I already knew that. I was like, I'm just not doing it. I'm not going to. But he convinced me to go and get my blood pressure taken. And while I was sitting there at this pharmacy that / little as a clinic or whatever, getting my blood pressure taken, I'm just sitting there. I'm just doing it to appease him. And the numbers that popped up, they didn't mean much to me, except right beside, I just glanced at the numbers, and then I glanced over at what they mean. And it said extreme risk or immediate risk for heart attack or stroke. And all of a sudden something happened to me. And it wasn't like people, like, when they have a near-death experience, they flash back on life.
Right.
I had this flash forward, and I thought, as miserable as I am now, and as much as I hate my life and I don't care about living, the things that I saw in my mind's eye about my future were so much worse than that if I didn't change. Literally, it was like in the blink of an eye, I have 2 daughters. I pictured my older daughter at her wedding, and I was there, and I was in a wheelchair, and I knew, I couldn't see it, but I knew I had on a diaper because I had a stroke, and my face was misshapen and from the stroke. And then I pictured my younger daughter, who was just 8 or 9 at the time. I pictured her graduation from high school, and there was an empty chair. I was dead. I wasn't there. And so it was like, all of a sudden, it was like, this is what your future is going to look like. You're either going to have a stroke, which you don't like life now. You're going to like it a lot less when you're wearing a diaper.
Right.
And then I pictured myself not there. And I was like, I don't want to miss. I suddenly wanted to live again. I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to miss this. I want to see my children live and thrive. I have been so deceived. And in that moment, I was like, I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to turn. I'm not going to go down this road anymore.
Wow.
I'm fixing to cry. Are
Me
you
too.
okay?
I mean, I guess I haven't talked about it in a while, but it's gratitude, Right.
Now, you hadn't done all the extensive, research and that you've done at this point, where do you think that came from? This flash forward.
I think that was a divine revelation. I think it was literally, this is what your future's going to look like. I believe it was a divine revelation. It was a moment, maybe sort of a Saul to Paul moment.
Sure.
where blinders came off my eyes, and I just it's not that all my thinking changed. I just knew this is not what I want for my future. And this is what's going to happen if I keep going on the same road. The funny thing is, so I'm like, I don't know what to do. I've done all the diets. I know all the things. You can probably show me something and I know how many calories it has in it because I've counted all the calories. I've done all the things. All that knowledge never helped me get better, by the way. None of it.
Right.
Without this revelation, right? So here's what my thought was. Well, I late 90s, early 2000s, when I did low carb, hey, sorry, I think it froze for a second. I'm not
for a second.
Sorry about that. I thought back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I did low carb. And what I remember about that is I could eat a whole lot of food and I still lost weight. That was the appeal of low carb for me compared to every other diet I tried. I knew I needed to change in that moment, and I wanted to. And so I knew about low carb from, I'd read the Atkins books and things like that. But in 2000, that was at the very beginning of 2016, there wasn't much out there. There were not the books and resources that there are out there. There was one that I knew of, and it was Keto Clarity. But I had not even heard of keto. I only knew low carb, but I got added to a Facebook group. And at that time it was a small group, and there were people posting in that group, and they were doing before and afters. And like I said, it was like 2,000 people, and it was like one of the only keto groups on Facebook. And I was like, something's different with these people. They're posting their food, and it was high fat. It was, not just low carb. And that, you guys are, I think we're around the same age. Like, we grew up in the you do not eat fat era. Yep. Like you just, like, you don't eat fat. The fat makes you fat. I remember Susan Powder, like, she had a whole audience that's chanting, the fat makes you fat. So we grew up believing that insanity. I'm watching these transformations, and I'm like, this is not the same as the low carb that I know. There's something different here in my curiosity. And then also they were saying, well, I reversed my diabetes. There were other things that people were saying. And I'm like, also, they look younger, not older. Most people who lose significant weight, they are aging. And I'm like, there's something I've been missing. And so I read the one book I could find, Keto Clarity, and then I found Wheat Belly and like Grain Brain. I was reading everything. Dr. Fung's books. Obesity Code was the only one that was there at that time. But I read all this stuff, and I started to understand I have never had adequate nutrition my whole life. All those years I was a vegetarian. I didn't get the protein. The protein I did get was soy. Yikes. Because tofu and all this yuck, fake meats, but certainly I'd never had fat. My brain had never been nourished my entire life. And the only fat I had was, the fat that's in donuts and combined with carbs and sugar. So I had never experienced that. And so I took a leap of faith and thought, you know what? This is one thing I haven't done in my life, is allowed that in. Like, really, I'm gonna eat butter? Like, this is crazy. And the cognitive changes that began in just 2 months. It took right around 2 months where something just started to unlock. Like, I had a lot of therapy and help for eating disorders and things like that. Even the stuff that was good, there's a lot of nonsense out there, but even the stuff that was good, I can never apply it to me. But I think I couldn't because my brain did not work well enough to receive it, process it, and apply it.
Couldn't connect the dots.
And that was it. Like, that was the beginning of this thing with me. And it was something I had never felt before. And I honestly would just say I was nourished. As heavy as I wasn't nourished.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack.
It is. And you know what's so funny is being someone who used to weigh over 425 pounds, and in the mental status of, you were thinking, I am nourished, I'm eating all this stuff, how can I possibly not be nourished? But if you are in such a mental status, if you're in a way where you can't think or process properly, that everybody equates overweight with too much of everything.
Right.
And I have noticed that as well, is that when you start eating the way you should, eating the fats, and then lifting the brain fog, and then you're like, it's like different night and day.
Yeah.
Well, everyone thinks, obesity and fat gain is an excess of everything. Everyone thinks that weight loss and fat loss is the removal of everything.
Yeah.
And it's just not that simple.
Right. It's taking out things that are creating harmful conditions and adding in things that are healing and nourishing. That's what it comes down to.
Turn down the noise.
Yes.
See what's left, and then add what's truly missing.
That's right. That is exactly it. Which of course, and this is always controversial, which I believe is not about calories. There's a lot of schools of thought about that, and all I know is my own experience. I've now worked with hundreds and hundreds of people over the years, and everybody's different. For me, if you had told me, Jessyca, you have to count things, you have to cut your calories, I would have been like, I'm not in a place in life where I can do that. I simply started with, and people that I meet that are just over the top like I was, that just need something simple, I start with them this way. And that is, just eat this, not this. Don't even limit how much. Don't worry about whether it's emotional eating or compulsive eating. Just eat this, not this.
Just
and
start.
For a time, that's all you need. That's all you need. Yes, I'm still binge eating. That's okay. You're eating this, not this. Simplify. And don't worry about calories. Don't worry about anything else. You need to get to a place where you can always layer in tweaks and personal experimentation. But some people hear a message in this community that you have to do this, and you've got to start off this way, and you've got to, do all this. I'm like, it's too much, and they never start. Or they do it for one day, and then they fail.
They realize it's too hard.
Yeah, it is. We make it too hard. And I think at the end of the day, when someone's struggling, they just need to go back to eat this, not that.
And that's, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Drive safely. That right there, that's kind of our mission. Is this keto space, low carb space has gotten so noisy.
Yes.
That there's all this information, and we were talking with Bronson and Nat about this. There's so much information, and for the most part, it's all accurate. It's all legit.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it applies to you.
That's
first of all.
So right.
And we say your nutritional needs are as unique as your fingerprint.
That's right.
Right.
But there's so much out there. You just get overwhelmed, and you're like, where do you start? It's like, I want to learn how to play the piano. Okay, well, here's some advanced pedagogy, and here's some Chopin, and here, go do it.
Yeah. Yes.
And you're like, what? And that's why we got into coaching.
Well, it's even confusing too, because you have a voice on one end that says you need to eat very high fat. You've got a voice on the other hand. The other hand says you can never lose fat if you eat very high fat. And both things are true depending on who you are and even where you are in your journey. You may need one thing at one point, and then you need something else at another point. And so I think it's not that they're wrong, except for the wrong thing is saying this statement that I'm making about calories or fat applies to everyone at all times. That is not right.
Yeah, dogma will stall anybody.
Yes.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yes.
And the other thing too is that, when someone asks me, I can't do keto, or I did keto and I can't do it, it's not sustainable in my life. And I said, just do what you can.
Mhm.
And I, like I told him, I said, my husband's journey is different from my journey.
Right.
I require certain things, he does not. And be okay with it. And I had one colleague, she was like, well, I was on it, I did great. And then we had a birthday party and I was like, screw it. And I said, but every day is a new day.
Right.
Every day you could start over
Yeah.
and not forget
Right.
to forgive yourself, give yourself grace, and be
Right.
okay with it.
I mean,
Yeah.
truly give yourself grace, not just, well, I'm going to give myself grace,
Right.
which, not a license to go
Right.
cheat. Everyone thinks it's the wrong thing.
Right. Yeah,
but
if you're planning it ahead of time, that's not necessarily grace. It's if you do a thing that you didn't intend to do, instead of heaping condemnation on yourself, I like to, in a non-condemning way, explore it. Because if you did a thing that you didn't intend to do, there's some sabotaging in there. And I think it's important to look at it, to work that out so you don't keep repeating that. But there is zero, if you allow that kind of enemy voice in your head to heap condemnation over a poor choice, a poor nutritional choice,
Right.
It will have you convinced to continue on that because you are a failure. And it'll point, again, I think that's where it gets into identity. See, you did it again.
Yes.
This is just who you are. And then you're like, well, I give up. And so giving yourself grace to say, I need to look at that thing. It's not who I am. I'm not good or bad. It drives me crazy when people say, oh, I was good or I was so bad last night. I'm like, who? Your goodness has nothing to do with your food choices. I don't care if you eat, donuts and ice cream every day of your life. It does not make you good or bad. But people say things like that, and it's a clue to just how strongly attached their food behavior is to their identity and what they believe about themselves. So I pull strings. I unravel.
Mhm.
That is what I do more than anything else. More than the food, I help people unravel that false identity and look at situations and say, was this emotional? Was it compulsive? How can I be aware going into future situations? How can I prepare myself and understand I'm going to probably have this thought, I'm going to have this compulsion, but I actually can win and not have to continue to repeat that behavior, but with no condemnation.
Right. It's got to be non-judgmental. It's got to
Right.
be, I've heard this for a long time, is when you, whether it's a past success or failure, see that in black and white.
Right.
Learn the lesson, but live today in vivid color.
That's right.
But that's in black and white, vivid color. And the future, that's paint by numbers. You're still making that.
Right.
But you touched on something else. It's all mindset. Whether it's diet, rest and exercise, any of this stuff, it all is kind of under the umbrella of mindset and awareness. And I think part of that too, you touched on it, whether you knew it or not. And you said it too. Well, I tried keto, or I did keto, or I did low carb for a while. Okay, which means, and then I didn't.
Right.
Which means
until I stopped.
Diet phase,
Right.
Diet mentality versus lifestyle change.
Right.
And they're two totally different things. One can lead to the other, but the mindset that you approach it with is vital. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I used to get so frustrated in the beginning because when you're changing and you're trying to share the message, it's very exciting. Nobody took me seriously, of course, even in my own family, because I had done so many things, and all the things I did, I had gotten excited about and tried to recruit everybody else into. Time will overcome that. But I was frustrated because people didn't know what keto was and they hadn't heard that word. And I was like, man, I just want to tell the world. And unfortunately, what has happened is it blew up and the word is out there, but the understanding of what it is. And then I'm going to say this too. Some people have so attached the way they eat, whether it's keto or carnivore, to their identity that they're lost in that too.
Yes.
And so that's part of the problem, is that yes, you can permanently change the way. So I used to preach keto, and now I just talk about food. My mom and I were going to the same doctor, and she had lost weight and was doing extremely well. And he asked her, how, and she says keto. He freaks out on her, and this was several years ago. And so going to the same doctor. He's great for other reasons. He doesn't get nutrition. He said, Jessyca, what have you done? Everything's good. You're so healthy. I'm like, well, I eat adequate protein, healthy fats, like I named all the healthy fats, green leafy vegetables, sometimes some cheese. He's like, that's perfect. Keep doing that. I described exactly what keto is, but I didn't use the word. And I think that's the mindset of a person. So it isn't just diet mentality. It's, I like to say I just eat real food.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody asks me about keto, I'm going to talk about keto specifically. But one of my personal mantras is just eat real food.
Yep.
I think going lower on the carb range helps your brain a lot. I think adding healthy fats helps your brain a lot. But just eat real food, and then it's not I'm doing a thing.
Right.
Right.
I had a client that texted me last night, and she's new to me, and she said, I'm kind of, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And I'm like, doing what? And she was like, eating this diet. And I said, what I'm hearing you say is, I don't know if I can eat real food. And she was like, almost like, wait, that is what I'm saying. Like, you can just eat real food. Like I can tell a person has complicated it in their own mind when they say things like
just their words.
Yeah. I'm like, I can tell exactly where she's at. And so what happens is, if you get in that diet mentality means there's an end point.
Right.
I'm using this specific parameters around eating to reach some endpoint, and then I'm going to return to the state I was in. I cannot remember who said this. It was at some conference many years ago. They said it was a doctor in the keto space, and I honestly cannot remember who it was, but he said people come to him and they say, well, I did keto, but it stopped working. And he said, he said, did you stop doing it? Well, yes. And then I regained all the weight. And he's like, it's like you saying I was dirty and I took a shower and now I'm mad that I got dirty again. You go and you get back in the dirt, you're going to get dirty again. It's the same way. So you really have to, you cannot bring diet mentality into what has to be a permanent change. And people are afraid to talk about permanent change. They want to say, well, today. And all we have is today. But seeing yourself as someone who is capable of never doing certain things and always doing other things is important. And there's lots of things we never do if we're convinced they're not good for us. Like I never smoke, never. And honestly, I never have. And it's because I've always been convinced that was not good for my body. You can become just as convinced about things you consume. And it's not hard to say I never smoke. Well, guess what? It's also not hard for me to say I never eat sugar, because I'm thoroughly convinced it's not good for my body. It's the same thing, but it's getting to that mindset where you can, that's not a scary thing to say.
Right. And it takes time sometimes to get to that place.
It does.
Which is why you don't, have them drink from a fire hose. You
That's
say,
right.
Just eat real food. Eventually, most of us are adults. They can figure it out. Yeah.
Yes. You figure it out for yourself, because what happens is if someone stops doing something or starts doing something because I tell them that they should, rebellion starts. Yeah. And because they feel restricted, and with restriction always comes rebellion. If you come to your own conclusion, I've eliminated this thing and I feel better, and I don't want to go back to feeling bad anymore. In fact, on the few times that I have gone back and done it, I have felt terrible and it's not worth it. there is no rebellion there because there is no restriction. It's their own personal choice based on what they've experienced. And getting people to that place, that's how transformation happens. And, you know, transformation is very different than change, because when you change, you can change back, right? But transformation means I can't go back and be the thing I used to be because I am not that anymore. I literally am not that.
Right.
You know, like talk about transformation pictures. Lots of people lose weight, but transformation means I'm literally not the same person. I don't think the same way. I don't act the same way. I don't respond to life the same way. And that's really, I think what you guys are trying to do is bring people to a place of transformation, you know, and that's what it's all about right there.
Yeah. When I heard you say just every, you know, change versus transformation on Tro's podcast, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so good. That's like, you put words to what I've been trying to describe, because it's completely different. There's somebody that we know that, you know, they're kind of a yo-yo, and all of this person's clients are kind of yo-yos. They're up, they're down, they're this, that, because it's a thing that they're doing. You know, maybe they got a wedding coming up, or they've got this event or that event. And if it's event driven, then you're kind of doomed to start. And you're
destination orientation, right? Yeah. Because and that's what it is. You can use little points in your life to propel you to experiment, to make a change. If you need to layer on something else, if you're ready, like, I'm going to see what happens if I do less of this or more of this. I've got this event. I do want to look nice for it. I do want to feel good for that. But when that thing is the thing,
that's the end point.
When that's the end point, it's the end point. You're more than likely going to return exactly to. And then that other thing that you just said too, people have to be so careful about following people and thinking, I'm going to do what that person did, and I'm going to get the same result as them, and I'm going to be just like them. And I realize, like, social media helps us, right? I mean, it's how we all know each other right now. Right. It's so important. But people are so locked into following certain people, they cannot allow themselves to experience anything. And like you said, sometimes that person is up and down and up and down and up and down. And then all their followers are up. This week, we're doing everybody's doing high fat. This week, everybody's doing low fat. It's like a train wreck. And so I think it's very important who we allow to influence us. And if you're not in a place that you can take what's good from it and leave the rest, you unfollow, go on your own journey. I'm like, even me, you know, like if I say something and you're like, that doesn't ring true with me, don't apply it. Please don't try. Please don't apply that to you then. This is my experience. That's right. This is my experience. And I think that's so important. People want to be led. They are looking for something to follow. They're searching for truth, but they get locked into a person instead of hearing a message and taking those pieces that they need and applying them to themselves. And that's a huge issue right now.
It is. And social media, I will say, you know, I don't know about your daughters and your children, but like our middle child right now who's in college, social media, it is such an impression on her that if she's like, well, if I do what they're doing, or if I look like they look like, I'll be just fine. And that's one of the things that we're working on her. And
like the false expectations.
And it's not even real too. You know, sometimes you see on, you know, celebrities, you see this picture of this perfection, and then you see a paparazzi photo from the same day on the same beach, and it looks entirely different. Their team hasn't fixed it up and airbrushed it and made it perfect. And our daughters and sons, and they are looking at something that's not even real and trying to be that, and then the disappointment and that's such a tough thing. We cannot have and not y'all, not me, not anybody else. Like, none of us should be you can be inspired, but none of us should be your heroes.
Right.
Inspiration's one thing, information's one thing, but to aspire to be something that most of the time isn't even real, that is it's a terrible, terrible thing, you know?
Yeah, it's, like you said, it's not real. You have no idea. We just had this whole room gutted and cleaned, and we're still putting it back together, but you can't see it. It's outside the shot.
Right.
So yeah, we want to protect a little bit. We don't want you to, literally see our dirty laundry.
Right.
But at the same time, we want to let folks know, hey, we're just real folks.
Right.
And that's why, when you take a before picture or a check-in picture, don't hold your gut in. Don't hold it at just the right
angle.
Just take the stupid picture. Yeah. It's okay. It's a circle of trust. If you're working with somebody or a group, it's a circle of trust. We're all there together. It's like we're all going from here. We're all driving out to Los Angeles, and we've all got our GPS. It's going to take us a little different route, and you're just, maybe you got a 5-hour head start, so you're up a little further, and you can say, "Hey guys, on this interstate at this mile, there's a cop. Slow down.
That's exactly
There's a pothole. I'm just further along the road. We're all going to the same place, which is a healthy life."
And I think it's important from a vulnerability standpoint. I don't share every struggle I have with all the people I work with, but when I feel like it's right, I will, because I want people to know you don't achieve this level of perfection. On one hand, you want them to understand, I don't still struggle with what you're struggling with. If you have a coach or you're following somebody that's still struggling with what you're struggling with, it's not a good thing.
Right.
You need someone who is the 5-mile head start. But it's also important to understand that there is not this point of perfection, at least not here on earth. There is no point of perfection where all of a sudden, like where you just arrive. And so I feel that for me, coaching is a calling. I've tried to do other things. I got my real estate license and I do that. And I was like, I feel like God's calling me away from coaching. He won't let me stop. He won't. Like,
you get it out of the blue call from
that's
Debbie.
That's where I get out of the blue call to speak on the low carb cruise, because he's like, oh, by the way, you're still doing this too, right? This is a calling. But our calling is when you have been lifted out and you have received these layers of revelation. And revelation comes in layers. When you receive that and you achieve greater levels of freedom, you're supposed to reach back and pull people along, but at the same time say, I'm still on this journey and I am working through this and I am pushing through this. And one of my goals in pushing through and getting there is not just a greater level of freedom for me. Is I know eventually those people that are coming along with me, they're going to get where I am right now. And I want to be able to say, here's how I made it out of that, and it's just a continual cycle.
Music to my ears.
So how do you, since you've done this for almost 9 years, how did you incorporate your life in getting better with your children?
Well, interesting. So one of my children is grown, and I have a grandson, and I have a granddaughter on the way in January. So, this is very interesting. My 17-year-old daughter, when she was a little girl, she was 4 years old, started having seizures and diagnosed with epilepsy. And she was on a bunch of meds, still had seizures, even with all the medications. And I had gone keto, and I was doing that. It did not occur to me that she should. So we go to her neurologist's office, and I see this it's just like a little sign in a plastic thing sitting on the desk, and it was something about the Charlie Foundation. Mind you, I am already keto, right? And so I just look it up real quick, and I'm like, I start to research, and I was like, oh my gosh. So she was 9 years old at that time. And I said, and this was a tough thing, and y'all have to know this as parents too. This was a tough thing. I said to her, Clara, this is not easy. I know it's not going to be easy for you, but I can't know of something that might help you and not try it. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot know of something that I said, if it doesn't work, if you don't improve, we'll let you eat what you want to. Now, I will say this, while I was keto, I did change things that I brought into the house some. Instead of like getting her bread, we would get low carb wraps and she would eat those. Not because we were trying to make her low carb. I was just learning that things. And instead of getting strawberry jelly, we just got strawberries, you know. So I had made some changes with her anyway, but to have her go keto, that was my thought. It's like, I can't know of something that might work and not try it. That would be being a bad parent.
Right.
So when she was 9 years old, as I said, she's now 17, senior in high school. We switched her to a ketogenic diet, and she was not happy about it. But she takes 1/2 of one dose of one medication and has not had a seizure in like 6 years almost. And
wow.
And honestly, you know, the last visit with her neurologist, they said she really could quit this. The problem is she drives, and when she quit an anti-seizure medication, you're not supposed to drive for 3 months. And she doesn't want to go through that. They're like, we think she doesn't need this anymore. So I believe her brain has been healed, because at one time we thought she had childhood epilepsy. They said, nope, that's not it. She's always going to have this. That's what the doctor said. But now when they do the EEGs, there is no evidence of seizure. So I call her healed. Call her healed. And so again, not everybody's in that same situation, but here's the point I'm going to make. It can heal your brain. It healed mine.
Mm-hmm.
It healed hers. If you know that this is the best thing for your children, give it a try. And it doesn't have to be the same thing exactly that you do. Like I said, I have a grandson, and people are like, well, you know, my grandson wants to make cookies with me. I'm like, mine does too. And I'll do that with him. But he'll say to me, even when he was little, I mean, he's 9 years old, but he would say to me, Lolly, you don't eat sugar because it's not good for you, right? I'm like, yes, it makes me feel bad. And he's like, okay. So he understood that at 4 years old. And people use all kinds of reasons like, oh, kids don't get that. They're going to think it's deprivation, or I'm going to give them an eating disorder because I'm telling them not to eat certain things. They understand. He understands.
Mm-hmm.
And so while not everybody needs to go hardcore like Clara did, October 1st will be 8 years that she's been keto, by the way. Amazing.
Wow. That's awesome.
Your motivation for doing a thing will allow you to do that thing. She is evidence of that. She's gone on class trips, sleepovers, camp, everything. And she has stuck with it. I'm not there. She's way past the age of me monitoring her food. She makes the choice because just like any of us, we say, I don't want the consequence that comes from not making good choices. She is evidence anyone can if they want to. If you have the proper motivation, anyone can change in any circumstance. There is no circumstance that prevents you from making the right choice. None.
Right.
Wow. And like you said earlier, you know, I've been doing this for a little while. I'm feeling good. What if I choose, let me try to reintroduce something, a little experiment. And you're like, nope, put that back off the
Your
list.
choice. That's
And
right.
it's a choice. It's not someone telling you.
Right.
Which makes it a big difference. So once she figured out that she had some choice, some skin in the game, then she can make those choices and realize, you know, did she do it perfect from day one, or did it kind of have wobbly legs at first?
So a couple interesting things. Like I said, she's been on October 1st is 8 years, just keto all the time. She has not on purpose chosen to consume anything, but a couple of situations happened, which is so interesting. So when I was first a coach, I actually, for many years, I worked for the organization that did KetoCon, and which is now Hack Your Health. I worked for them. I was involved in that. And the first KetoCon, I think we had like 500 people. It was 2017. Clara was a little bit of a public figure. I had made her a page, Super Keto Clara, telling her story, right? And people knew her, and she was this cute little thing. And I was working there at KetoCon, and we kind of just let her run around and go to all the vendors, right? I mean, and people were taking pictures with her and posting them. They were all giving her keto ice cream, keto cookies, all keto, right?
Right.
But it was a lot of carbs. Guess what happened to her? She had a seizure.
Wow.
So she experienced that kind of early on, that too many carbs seizure, right? So then she's like, I don't even want to mess with real sugar if I'm eating all these things, these products that are okay for some people, but I can't have too many carbs. And then the only other time, so that was one seizure. In the last 8 years, she's only had 2. The second one was she was in a situation where she did not have access to good food. She went away to a church camp, and she had gone before, but there were different leaders, like, we understand about her food. We know what she's got to have. And instead of actually having what she needed to have, they thought gluten-free was the same thing as keto. She knew the difference, but she really wasn't nourished. She didn't have any source of fat the whole week that she was there. She had some chicken, she had some lettuce. She didn't eat the gluten-free stuff. She knew, like, this stuff is not good for me. Seizure. And that was 6 years ago. So basically what she experienced from, I didn't get adequate fat from my brain, I inadvertently consumed way too many carbs. Those things caused me to have a seizure. That has kept her from fooling around with the real thing, from real sugar or anything like that. And again, that's not, we have never, like, had to, like, beat this into her. It's she has come to those conclusions based on, I don't like what happens to me when I don't eat good. And and that has worked for us. And,
So
as
she experienced it herself.
She's going to go to college next year. I trust her to God, but I also just trust and believe her own experiences. That'll be 9 years when she goes to college. She'll make the right choices. And it's, some people are like, you deprived her of something. Like, she hasn't got to have this and this and this and this. And I'm like, you know what? I feel like most kids at some point are going to have obesity, diabetes, lifestyle diseases. I said, I would rather hold her hand through having a keto birthday cake instead of a regular birthday cake than hold her hand through giving herself shots for type 2 diabetes. And to me, that was the choice.
Wow.
And that's so funny, because our society, that you said something that triggered me, because our society says you're denying your child to enjoy life. And I'm like, if they're not going to enjoy life if they have diabetes, they're not going to enjoy life when they have migraines. They're not going to enjoy life when they've got inflammation, and now they're on rheumatology medications, or, medications from endocrine
the list
to
just
neurology.
grows and grows.
I mean, being a specialty nurse, like working for rheumatology, I've had several of my patients who were like, Miss Julie, I am so tired of the inflammation in my joints. I can't move my hands. And I'm like, what are you eating? And the thing that I always
that's what society says. Take what's pleasurable now. That's what the world says. Get pleasure now, deal with the consequences later. Or don't worry about the consequences.
Don't worry about the consequences.
Just do what is the normal, acceptable thing now. And there might be some consequences, but we'll probably have a pill for that by then. I mean, that is what society tells us to do. And anytime you're doing something that looks drastically different than the world, you're going to get picked on. I mean, I've literally had people, you guys know this, when you put yourself out there in the world, you open yourself up to keyboard warriors who say things. I've had people say that is child abuse. Like, I mean, literally.
But they type it all caps.
Yeah. Oh, awful. Just like bam, like, just, but you get big shoulders too. And if you know the truth, you will not be rattled by people who don't. You'll just be like, I'm sorry you don't know or understand, but I do.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me ask you this, because I want to make sure we cover this. So we're people of faith. We know you are, and our mutual faith is Christian. So there's a lot we
Yes.
could unpack there. And number one, do you incorporate that where applicable with your clients, and how? And then also, and we talked earlier, as a nurse, she has to take all these courses and certifications for cultural awareness, religious awareness from
Sure.
other cultures. How do you incorporate that with other cultures, other faiths, when you're saying eat a lot of animal-based products, and maybe they come from a different culture?
Mm-hmm.
How do you handle that?
Well, I've learned to handle it over the years as people have come to me in different ways, and everybody, what you don't want to do is ask someone to compromise something that they deeply believe, right? And I think religion is sort of one of those things where a person, well, it depends, right? I mean, you can be raised in a certain religion and not feel strongly about it. It's just it was what my parents were, whatever. There's a difference in religion and deeply held beliefs.
Right.
And so one of the things I love about being a coach and not being a nurse or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist is we have a little bit more leeway on how to present things. And I am very aware, and I've worked with people of different ethnicities. I've worked with different religion, all those different things. And here's the thing that it all comes down to for me: truth. Right?
Yeah.
Truth stands in the middle of everything. Like, truth does not change based on different beliefs. It doesn't. There are certain things that are just true. True. Nobody needs sugar, and it's bad for everybody. Right? And so I always recenter back to truth. And the other thing I'm going to say about truth, because that's a food truth, right? So I zero in on what are the truths, nutritional truths, but then there is a greater truth too, a truth of freedom, a truth of purpose, a truth of calling, and I always pull people into that. Now, only in the last 2 years is my coaching openly faith-based. I just felt a calling on my life, and I did leave the group that I was with and go into coaching on my own for that reason. I wanted to be free to say I am a Christian, and coaching is faith-based. I do not preach at people, but I let my life speak the way I live my life. I let that speak for my beliefs, but I believe truth stands regardless. And if you bring people to a place of this is true, when you start to really talk about purpose, and you talk about identity, and you talk about pulling behaviors away from identity, you weren't created to be messed up. Even if a person, whatever their beliefs are, even if they don't believe in anything, something happens in a person's heart when you speak truth to them. Something springs up in them, hope. And I definitely work with people who don't really have any kind of religious affiliations or beliefs at all, and they are not offended by me. They're not offended by what I believe, and they can still hear that truth that's there. So you don't wrap it. I don't wrap anything in any kind of religion. I literally just focus on what is the best way for me to give this person a revelation of truth. And you peel all the titles off, you peel all the labels off, and truth stands. It never changes. I mean, and in fact, if you base your life on truth, you will be stable. If you base it on just what I feel, what's happening to me, what I've experienced, what I believe about myself, you're going to be all over the place. And what we want a walk with food, with our family, with relationship, with all things. We want a stable walk. And the only way to get that is truth. And I think when you speak truth, people know it inherently in their heart, and beliefs they're almost like secondary, right?
Everyone's got that truth detector built into them. When something resonates, it's like ding, 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 ding.
Yes. But and you know it because hope springs up when you hear it.
Yes.
Right.
And I
And
think
it gives you peace, and you're like, okay, like this is a calming water for me. Okay, I'm not sure what to do with it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But it's present, and I'm right where I need to be.
Well, my job is never to evangelize someone ever. I believe I am called to speak truth to people and then allow God to work in their hearts however he wants to. And we are not God. Like we hope in the way that we live, we represent him, but that is not our job. And so I just feel strongly like if I'm speaking truth, and not everybody understands all aspects, but I believe that I've been given the grace to speak things in a way that are not offensive, but that people can respond to. And I'm grateful for that. And that's what's a calling. And that's why I can't just be a real estate agent. I think my whole life will also be a coach. Like I said, I tried to leave and I couldn't. I just couldn't. And I'm always pulled back to it. And I think that's what a calling is.
Wow. Well, it's definitely working. Just keep doing it. So, well, we'll let you go. We want to respect your time. Where can people find you?
Coach Jessyca. I have a website, coachjessyca.com.
With a Y.
Jessyca. You know, on the cruise, I don't know if y'all know Mitzi Champion. She and I have been friends for a long
us
time.
Too. Yeah.
Many years. And she was like, she texted me after I did my speech on the cruise, which was called When Food is a Stronghold. And I'll send that to y'all so you can see it, because I know you said you hadn't found it, but I'll send it on Instagram. But she was like, Jessyca. Because at the end of it, they were like, where do we find you? And I'm like, it's coachjessyca.com, Jessyca with a Y. She's like, Jessyca, you have to start saying Jessyca with a Y. Because she knows me. She knows my message. And so good. I was like, Mitzi, that is so good. I'm going to give you credit. Every single time I say that, I'm going to give you credit for that. Because it's true. Like, that is what I do. Like, Jessyca with a Y. But yeah, it's Jessyca. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm not prolific in posting. When I feel like something is on my heart, I post it. My website, you can read more about me. You can listen to some of the podcasts that I've been on, which should be interesting because of my message changing, my revelation over the years changing. But I'm always happy to interact with folks anywhere, and I'm easy to find.
Thank you.
It
was
so
such a
much.
wonderful.
Yeah. This
awesome.
Is great.
Well, I hope I get to meet you guys in person at some point. But I love this community, and having been away, and then being invited to speak on the low carb cruise, I realized how much I had missed the community. I was still, I was still coaching on my own, doing a group. I do a Breaking Strongholds group. We restart every 8 weeks, and it's specifically focused on food as a stronghold in your life versus your identity. And it's specifically focused on emotional and compulsive eating. And wow. That group it's a calling, and I actually created it because of the response from the low carb cruise. I felt like I was supposed to create that 8-week group to walk people through the steps of breaking off strongholds of food. So you can read about that. You can find it on the website too. But yeah, anyway, I missed community. So this is wonderful to be here with you guys today.
So you got a raging hot fire. You take an ember away, it starts to cool off. Yeah. It's not cold yet, but now you're back in the fire. So that's so cool to see. Jessyca, thank you so much. And
my pleasure.
I'm sure we will see you further down the road and on the interwebs.
All right. Sounds good.